Welcome to Talk South Asian to Me. My name is Michelle.
And my name is Anusha. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central and hear us react to each other's stories about mental health and growing up in different South Asian households.
And remember, this podcast is not therapy. Engage with what feels entertaining and resonates with you and leave what doesn't. Okay, you ready for our next topic?
I'm ready. It's Kay.
Yes, it is Kay. Okay, it's time for Kay. So our
You're so
topic
cute.
is kids, and in parentheses we have DINK, which I'm going to further define, but it's an acronym, stands for Double Income No Kids. That's what our topic is. And, before we get into this topic, we wanted to share a disclaimer that we're referring to this topic as the choice of not having kids. And we know and acknowledge that there could be many other reasons of not having kids that might be health related or fertility related. And so we want to make sure we acknowledge that. But going forward, we'll be referring to, the term DINK and double income no kids and having no kids. When we're saying those things, it's related to due to a choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And so I wanted to ask you, Anusha, have you heard of that term before?
The first time I heard that word, that acronym, was with you. And before that, I was just like, what is DINK? What does that mean? But get this, I think Avi went and mentioned DINK to our family. And my uncle was like, oh, yeah, that existed back then. And I was like, what?
Yes, it
How
did.
long has DINK
You're
existed?
Right.
I have no
You're
idea.
Right. Yes, there's some history behind that word or that term. But newly, there's a modification recently of DINK. It's DINK WAD, which is really fun and cool. Stands for Double Income No Kids with a Dog.
With a
which
dog.
Is so cool.
I love that.
I will say the first time I heard that term was on TikTok. I think it's becoming a more of a trend. Like couples are sharing their experiences of being DINK couples, double income, no kids, and what they're doing and all of that. But I did some digging, and Ali's family member was correct. It does have some history. It actually dates back to the 80s. This term.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. So a Los Angeles Times article published on February 8th, 1987, written by Nikki, I might butcher the last name, Fink, I might be saying that wrong, but this author wrote about the term DINK and introduced it by saying that these are like the baby boom couples at this time who are starting to, like the females, the woman in the family is also becoming more part of the workforce, right, at that time. So they're working for wages, and they so far do not have any children.
Wow.
But as I was reading that article, the author was sharing quotes from people who were being called DINKs. And it was interesting. At that time, people did not appreciate being called that. They were saying it's stereotypical. It was derogatory. It was it was just something that they were like, we don't want to be labeled. We already get labeled as the baby boom couple to the that generation.
So it wasn't like really an empowered term. It was kind of like an insult almost.
Yes. But in today's time, I feel like it's the opposite. Everyone's like, using that term in pride almost and saying like owning we're a DINK couple. Yeah, they're owning it. Like, this is how we are and this is who we are and this is why we choose what we do.
Yeah.
So it's not solely to South Asians. I've seen this, term with many different communities. And again, that LA Times article doesn't differentiate anything by race. It just talks about like America at that time. But this is the Asian podcast. I wanted to do a little bit more digging when it comes to South Asians and the South Asian community.
Yeah.
Right. And I wanted to kind of talk about how that is a taboo. I'm sure for some people might have witnessed, like where there's like lots of pressure and expectation that after marriage, immediately sometimes after marriage, you're expected to have a child.
Yeah.
And I was trying to do, like, I was looking at some research articles written by South Asian authors about, this topic and some quotations shared by people who are dinks and, people who are choosing not to, even if they want children, but they're delayed, right? They want to enjoy maybe their marriage or become
Mm-hmm.
established as two people being married, then have a child, right? Like all those things. But they still hear comments, even if they're delaying that choice, right, of
Okay.
having a kid.
Gotcha. So
And so like
DINK, it doesn't
someone,
necessarily mean it's like a long-term lifestyle you're choosing, it's or not choosing. It's more so just this time period you are living a DINK life.
well, yeah, I think so. Like, I think, yeah, like all the content that I've seen around DINK when it comes to TikTok, Instagram, like
Yeah.
all these things, South Asian, non-South Asian,
Mm.
like it just talks about that state. Like we are a DINK couple.
Right now. Right. Gotcha.
But I
Gotcha.
think it's loose. I think it could be used as a
Okay.
lifestyle as well. I think people
Yeah,
just
that makes
use it in
sense.
their own interpretation. But the
Yeah.
article that I found wasn't really like a lot, there weren't really direct South Asian articles talking about directly DINK, but it does talk
Okay.
about delaying kids or not wanting kids and what happens and what type of
Sure.
comments do you experience and hear.
Mm.
So this one article I found about this topic, the author shared a interview that they did with someone who had just got married
Mm.
and didn't want kids right away, and they were sharing like, oh, like immediately after their wedding, like a couple days after their wedding, the parents were saying we can't wait for mini yous running around.
Oh
So
no.
it's so interesting, right? Like this
Yeah.
idea where it's ultimately up to the couple
Mm.
is, also can be subconsciously controlled by parents and in-laws and things like that when it comes to South
Mm.
Asians and the South Asian
Yeah.
community.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to dig into, now there's an increase of couples not wanting kids or delaying kids. But like, why is
Mm-hmm.
that case? Why is that the case specifically in the South Asian community? Why are South Asian couples choosing not to have kids? So I
Mm.
found an article titled, Why Are Indian Couples Choosing Not to Have Children? And the author also explains different interviews and quotes of people who are going through this experience. Like a young Indian woman from London,
Mm.
age 26, shared that she does not wish to have a child despite being in a long term relationship because she goes on saying, when I was younger, I often saw and heard my father abusing my mother verbally and physically.
Mm.
In Indian
Yeah.
culture, men are usually the ones with all the power. I don't want the generational trauma to carry through for
Wow.
me and my future.
Yeah.
Career is their priority. They don't want to sacrifice what they've worked so hard for. So, you know, I kind of want to point to this topic in a way that the issue doesn't lie in the choice and ability of whether someone wants to have kids, right? It's their choice, like that's their decision, and who are we to judge, right? Of what's going on and what their story is. But the issue is with the response from society.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the issue
Mm-hmm.
lies, right?
Yeah.
And so I found another article by Alana Akhtar published on July 6, 2023, titled When South Asian Women Choose to Go Child Free. It's a great read. And
Mm.
this author talks about how women face rejection, right? They're shunned, they're not being invited to their social events that might be happening that are more child related. So they're kind
Sure.
of like just feeling isolated and not
Mm.
really accepted by society, which is not
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
right? And this author also cited some research, just U.S. research, general research of the U.S. population, how as of 2021, 44% of Americans that are from 18 to 49 years old did not want children,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot.
Wait, what's the
44%. That's
percentage?
44. That's almost half.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me, and yet it does surprise me. Like that number is quite high, which makes sense
Yeah.
because that's what I experience in my world around me, that so
Mm-hmm.
many people would rather not or delay or just not sure. So it makes sense, but to hear that number out loud, like, wow,
I
that's nearly
know.
half a population.
Yes. And
Wow.
I believe couple years before this research was done in 2018, it was like 37%. So just in the matter of 3 years, it
Wow.
went up by so much,
Yeah, wow.
which isn't, it was just crazy. And it's like so
Mm,
interesting, right? Like this trend of
yeah.
increase, but it's like people choosing, it almost shows that did all along people having kids, did that have to do with themselves and their own choice or others' preferences for them? Right? It's so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Right?
I have to imagine at least for half the population, maybe, or somewhat of a fraction of a half the population, that it was probably pressure. Just it's what was
Yeah.
expected, right? You do
Yeah.
things first this, then that, then this. It's just the
Mm-hmm.
line of order in which you follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the
Wow.
last thing I wanted to share was I found like a social media thread about people talking
Mm-hmm.
about it, like South Asian community members talking about this topic of why they don't want kids or what's the, what retaliation they're facing. And so some of the
Mm-hmm.
comments that some people have faced, I'm just sharing some quotes from that thread, is that you're so selfish by not giving your parents grandchildren when they struggle
Yeah.
to raise you. It's your duty as a woman to have children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who will take care of you when you get old? Childbirth is
Yeah.
painful, but it's worth it.
Mm.
Children are such a miracle and blessing. You're too young to understand. So, these are probably like just a few of many comments that people might hear and experience,
Yeah.
especially in our community when this is such a taboo. The
Mm-hmm.
pressure is really real to
Yeah.
procreate.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Wow.
Do you have any
That none of that
thoughts?
surprises me, honestly. None of that surprises me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to a couple, and those that I
Yeah.
can't relate to that are a little bit shocking, even for me, I've definitely heard other people talk about.
Yeah.
That's what they hear a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Wow.
It's 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 great to see more and more people are feeling comfortable in choosing this lifestyle or making these choices for themselves, right? But it's also disheartening to hear about the rejection that they face and
Mm.
the isolation that they face, and it's not okay, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You shouldn't be isolated or shunned just because you're choosing or you're not able to have kids.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's just one of those. I think that it's just one of those. It's just another layer in which this generation is choosing to be more aligned with who they are, what they want, rather than
Yeah,
following the tradition of it all.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
like with anything else that we talk about that's about generational cycle breaking, you do risk a very lonely road sometimes of not feeling very understood or not
Yeah.
feeling like you have the support, even not
Yeah,
feeling seen and heard.
for sure. But the beautiful thing about social media is that these couples are connecting. Like when I was researching about the
Yeah.
recent,
Mm.
emergence of this term now, right, in a different light, these couples are connecting, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram, and they're creating their own community, which is
I
beautiful.
love that. I love that so
Yeah.
much. Yeah. Because honestly, sometimes our chosen family is where we can feel heard and seen
Yeah.
and accepted. And those are important needs. They got to get met somewhere.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So going into my
Mm.
experience a little bit, I don't have like a single
Yeah.
story, but I have instances
Okay.
I wanted to share and just
Yeah.
things that I've observed. I'm not a mother myself, but I wanted to kind of share like comments I've heard and like
Mm. Sure.
just someone who's about to get married, right? Like you're hearing all these things and being in a long-term relationship, expectations are starting to come bubble up. So,
Yeah. Fun
so
time.
yes. And I feel like it's not just family in the South Asian community
Mm.
that faces this rejection, isolation, or mistreatment. It's like in
Yeah.
society too, right? Like when you look at the
Sure.
numbers in the workplace and females,
Yeah.
like there's people that I know of that are afraid, they might be afraid to tell their bosses that they're pregnant because they want to avoid further stress or retaliation. And so like
Mm-hmm.
that's not like that type of rejection and
Yeah.
fear is not okay.
Absolutely.
That you feel discriminated against in the workplace, that you feel that you have to in order to have a child, there's a possibility of your career being sacrificed in a way, right? Your professionalism. And that's something that I've observed, not personally, but I have observed with others. And that just really saddens me. I have seen others have to make more sacrifices when it comes to having kids, especially like in my personal life. I've seen my mom, who's very, very ambitious, very, very successful in her career. But I could tell like motherhood has tend to sometimes, not even motherhood itself, like expectations of motherhood from other family members has hindered her in like achieving all the rest of the ambitions and goals she's had in her life. And that's really hard to see, right? That's just like like all this time I can see like why some people might choose not to have kids is because they see maybe their own parents sacrificing so much to be able to care for that child or meet those societal expectations of having a child and taking care of that child, right? Like maybe I've heard of taboo of like daycare, like, oh, like you shouldn't put your child in daycare. Like that's not good. You need to stay home with your child and take care of your child, right? Like that's something that I've heard and seen as well. I've also been told from elders in my family that the reason to get married is to procreate. Like that's why I should get married. Like that should be the sole purpose of getting married is to procreate, to have a kid. And that's like completely opposite of what I think of marriage. So I was like very, very astonished when I heard that. I was like, I've also heard I've heard people say like, females should not be going to work. They belong in the household. They belong to have kids. They belong to just be at home, take care of the house, and have kids. That's how it should be. I've also heard the ridiculous statement of that's the reason why divorce is going up is because females are going to work. Wives are going to work. And I'm like, nope, that is not true. Right?
Where's the proof?
Yeah, exactly. Where is the proof?
Where's the science? It's the logic in that.
Yes. And don't get me wrong, like motherhood, it seems very, like the beauty of it seems very appealing. Like it's so like, it seems like such a beautiful experience to go through from like the beginning to like all the way until like you let go of your child to like go off to the real world and college or whatever that means. But it's just so sad to see the retaliation and the downside of people facing these things. And then I would say like when it comes to like the DINK life or the DINK choice, right? Like double income, no kids. I've seen friends that have chosen that lifestyle, even if it's like just delaying or as of right now, like hearing those comments. Like I had a friend at the wedding night, they were already getting comments like, oh, like we're so ready, for you. I'm like, what?
Just got married, but okay.
Right? I've, personally too, like I've considered that lifestyle too, like my fiance and I, the DINK life. And I'm starting to like share that with my parents and my family. And it's almost as if like they think I'm being sarcastic. Like,
that's a joke. Like, you can't be real. No way.
Yes. Or like laughing it off and like, oh, you don't mean that. No. And I'm like, no, like this is not a decision on a whim, right? Like we're educated people, both of us. We've thought about it. We've had conversations and this is where we are at right now, right? You can still, like you talked about, like it's a loose term, like DINK lifestyle is loose. And like as of right now, like that's where we are. And who knows where we are, a couple years from now. But this is where we are right now and this is how we believe. And I also think it's so interesting how much it's like meddled with, like from other family members. Like this decision shouldn't involve in-laws and parents. It should be only up to the two people, right? So that's something that comes to mind. Like it's just not okay.
Yeah. Wow. That doesn't surprise me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I am sorry that you're getting that already.
Yes.
That's always rough to navigate, of course.
I'm prepared. And if not, I have my therapist.
You go, girl,
Shout
with all
out
your
to her.
boundaries. I love it. Yeah. That's so sweet.
Yes.
Wow. Was that all you wanted to share?
Yeah, that's what I have.
Okay.
Like, just like small instances
Yeah.
of what I've witnessed and experienced myself.
Yeah. I kind of have the same kind of story today too, just small instances, moments, because obviously like I'm not a mom either, so I don't have like a particular story here, but I will say though, growing up, I don't know if you remember, but growing up, like I loved kids. I was obsessed with kiddos, and I always thought like, yeah, I'm definitely going to be a mom. Like that was never
Yeah.
even like a doubt in my mind, because they're just so freaking cute.
Yeah, they
And
are.
cuddly and adorable.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I honestly, like, I was one of the, yeah, I think I was the eldest, at least growing up here in America at that time. Everyone else was like kiddos, like really, really young kiddos. So I always got, at the time it was really fun. I got to be the babysitter at all parties every weekend. Um,
Yeah.
but then you grow up, you experience life, and then you understand being an adult is like kind of a energy drain at times, and then
Yeah,
your
it
perspective on
is.
kiddos changes. You're like, wow, they're so cute still, but honestly, it's a lot of work. Which you don't see that when you're younger. You're like, oh, you've got energy. Why are parents always tired? Oh my god, this is so easy. You just gotta play with your kids. And then now as an adult, you're like, oh, but I'm tired, I don't want to play.
Yeah.
So I feel like my views on children and like parenting and like it's really changed. And when we were working together, I don't want to say exactly where, but when we were working, with the kiddos on the spectrum and everything, like even I mean, I know it's kids on the spectrum, not all kids are of course going to be the same, whether kids on the spectrum or otherwise. Everyone has like a range of disposition. All kids are different. No kid is ever
Mm-hmm.
going to be the same as another kid, whether that be their
Yeah.
disposition or how they tantrum, how they behave, anything. But that's another
Yeah.
scary part too, is no one kid is the same as the other, which means there's just this tiny little baby ball of chaos, and you have no way of predicting what that chaos is going to look like. Can't really prepare for it. That's scary.
Yeah.
And that opportunity, that job really kind of put it into perspective too, of what it's like to actually take care of a child, what it's like
Mm-hmm.
to have to like discipline a child. And I think it was kind of already feeling, like a little unsure, but that was really a turning point for me, I think, after that job, of like asking myself, do I really know what it takes to have a kid? Do I really want that? Do I want it? Or do I think I
Mm-hmm.
want it? Because, like you said earlier,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a propaganda that's pushed by society, and no one pushes it harder than our family, right? Our parents,
Yes.
our grandparents, our you know, in-laws. No one wants kids more than the people who, are going to be like grandparents or great grandparents, because
Yeah.
they get
They don't
to
have to do
just
the
be the
work.
fun grandparents. They get to see this cute
Yes.
little bundle of joy. That's it. They don't get to do the work.
Yeah. Yes.
So with that propaganda, like, I don't know. I'm still, honestly, I'm still sorting out, do I want kids because I want kids and everything that means, or do I want kids because I think I need to have kids because that's
Mm.
what I've been told. I'm not sure yet. Figuring that out.
Yeah.
And the scary part too, though, I don't think we've ever talked about this, but the scary thing too, though, now especially, is that I don't know if I can have kids either, right? Because I have PCOS, right? So polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I know I've got cysts on my ovaries. Like, I've checked it, little TMI, but that means there's definitely a possibility of infertility. And it's always a struggle because I'm also a little bit scared to find out and really answer that
Mm-hmm.
question of if I want to have kids or not. Because what if I decide that I actually do, and I went through all that emotional work to realize I really want a kid, and then I can't have a kid?
Yeah.
That,
That's
I think, would
heavy.
be really, really heavy and devastating.
Yeah.
Of course, I would have no issues. Like I would adopt if I really wanted a kid and I couldn't have one biologically, I'd adopt. But there is, it just feels different, right? It kind of hits you too, because it kind of logically, I know this isn't true, so this is not me saying it's true, but I imagine for a lot of people, and maybe even me in that moment, would I blame myself? Like I'm not doing my duty, as a female, as a wife, right? Because that is, whether we like it or not, that's the kind of rhetoric that's out there in society, right? Because you said it yourself, like some people do kind of throw it in your face of like, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have a kid. You're supposed to procreate. That's your responsibility. That's your duty. That's your role. It's hard not to, at least in those really, really low moments, even if you don't believe it, ask yourself that. Wonder. So it's a lot. This topic itself is a really heavy one for a lot of reasons. But on a lighter note, I've definitely, the day of my wedding, the very day, I've definitely had that pressure even from the very beginning of like, oh, now you guys are married. Now you know the next thing. Now we're going to get together again soon when you have your kid. And I'm like,
it's so awkward when they say that. You know the next thing.
I know. It's like, no, I don't. I'm looking forward to sleeping. That's all I'm going to do. Sleeping. It's so crazy. And I mean, at the time, it was a lot more funny. It was just like, wow, can't catch a break. Get married and then boom, what's next, right? Yeah. But since then, it's been a couple of years, right? Since we got married, and it hasn't quite let up. Expectation is definitely still there from everybody. I'll tell you a really funny story. One time we were talking about this. We were trying to have a serious conversation with mom about whether we wanted kids or whether we didn't, because we didn't know. Yeah. We were thinking about it. And then my mom wasn't really engaging. So we're like, Mom, are you listening? She's like, yeah, I'm listening. She's like, so what do you think? I mean, I don't know. How do I figure this answer out? And she goes, I won't have this conversation until you're ready to have the conversation. And I was like, when would that be? And she's like, when you're ready to have a kid. And I was like, Mom, that would be me deciding and knowing. That would not be a conversation. And she's like,
exactly.
It's she was just like, I know. Like it's just so obvious where she stands. Like, I don't know exactly. She's never really shared. I don't know if it's just like she wants a grandchild or if she's like, you're going to regret it. Like, I don't know what her thinking or thought process is behind it. But she was just kind of like, we'll talk when you're ready, when you know you want one. I was
like in denial, right?
Yeah, that's logic. Yeah, like, makes sense.
That's really funny.
Yeah. And then my dad, though, he super surprised us when he told us. He was like, I don't have an opinion. I want you guys to do what you want to do because I can't have an opinion on this. Yeah. That blew me away. My dad, I love that. Loves children. Like, he is a goofy uncle, goofy grandpa. He's a goofy everything. He loves kiddos. And so it was just so surprising to hear that from him. I'm sure he has an opinion, but to hear him like very, like, because we even said like, okay, thank you. Like, we appreciate that. But what do you want? Like, he didn't say one thing or the other. He was like, nope, not my place.
That's amazing. Nope. So, I know. Like, I love that. Very open.
It really blew me away. I don't know what made Dad feel so, like, strongly about it. I have no idea, because, I don't know. I mean, I feel like a couple of years ago, I don't think Dad would have said that. In fact, he was definitely one of the people after the wedding to be like, can't wait for grandkids, or to show me in Costco cute little baby clothes and be like, can't wait to buy these.
Oh my gosh. I know. It's so like the passive comments for everything.
Yeah.
Like that.
Like, can't wait to buy these. These will look cute. Should we buy them? It's like, no need. Wow. Yeah. And oh my gosh, Avi, though, he doesn't take kind of that like curious, questioning, honest, authentic approach like I took with Mom, even though it didn't work out well. He just like gets in there and like he gets aggressive almost with his mom, but he does it just to rile her up, unfortunately, most of the time. Because I think that out of two of us, he's more sure that he wants a child. Like, he's just kind of like, yeah, no, I want. Yeah, I want to be a dad.
Yeah.
I got to pass on these good genes. I'm like, all right, they're not that great, but okay. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. So when he gets into these things with his mom, my mother-in-law really, really wants to be a grandma. She's ready.
Oh.
She's been ready. Girl, she has been ready. So when he gets into it with her, they like just, I don't even know what they talk about. They just like really get in there, like fighting about like pros and cons. I'm like, no. She's like, no, you're going to regret it if you don't want one. And you don't know, like, you know, like what's going to happen. You don't want to wait too long and then not be able to have kids, you know, just, so she like really gets in there with those things. And then eventually, because he's obviously playing a role here and she can't break through to him, she like turns around and goes, Anusha, look at what your husband is doing to me. I'm just like, okay, don't involve me in this. Yes. I don't want to get into this ridiculously pointed discussion, because at the same time too, he's just doing it to get a rise out of her, right? And I think that that's a thing that a lot of people in this current, I guess, climate, we can call it, some people, you know, like you said at the beginning, have the privilege of being able to have kids, and you can choose not to. That's your right to be able to choose. But it also isn't fair sometimes to be joking about these things, because like for me, when I hear these as jokes, it's a little triggering too, because I have very realistic fears of not being able to have a child, and so it's difficult to hear these jokes, but I know that it's well intentioned. He just likes to rile his mother up.
I think it goes both ways. I think it's the jokes from like elders and making jokes about can't wait to see, like sending the Costco clothes. But I think it also goes the other way of like people who choose not to have kids and are insensitively, oh my gosh, sorry, I can't speak right now, are making jokes about why they don't want to have kids. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go through this. I don't want to do this, right? Like, again, you're right. You said it's like a privilege and you shouldn't be joking either way, right? Like, it is a topic that can be triggering for some people.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, though. Oh, like, you just, you never know in whose presence it'll be triggering and whose presence it won't be triggering.
No, so for sure.
It's just a courtesy, you know, to not be joking about these things, because you never know who is struggling with these things. It's not like this is something that people are going to be loud and proud about or super vulnerable about. It's such a personal, vulnerable journey to go through. And unfortunately, there is research that says that infertility is on the rise for lots of reasons. I'm not going to get into them, but so it is increasingly an actual issue for a lot of people. So you never know where certain things are jokes and certain things are insensitivity. It's just best to not, you know, get into that.
Stick with your own personal choice in a respectful manner to others.
Yeah, so exactly. I will say too, though, so this is very personal, but this is the year that we're really like allowing ourselves to figure out some of our, like, you know, whether it be the just generational things or, you know, just these kinds of considerations of like what is true to who we are and aligned with who we are as people versus what is things that are pressures. This is one of the things that we're figuring out this year, and like kind of going on this journey of like, do we want one? Like, what does that mean to want one? What are we going to be like as parents? How do we want to act as parents? You know, kind of going through that whole emotions before we decide whether or not we're going to have one, because it's not, maybe everyone doesn't need to be a parent for more reasons than one. You know, if you're going to be a parent, that's a responsibility that you should genuinely consider thoroughly of what that means.
It's a responsibility.
Exactly. And so that's what we're trying to figure out right now. But what that means is I'm finding out answers maybe I don't want to find out. Like the difficulties of, you know, pregnancy. How come no one talks about the difficulties of pregnancy and the complications? Right? I don't know about you, but I've never heard anybody mention the complications that exist within pregnancy. It's always like, yeah, you know, it's a little uncomfortable. You're like, get swollen feet, you might ache here and there, but you know what? It's fine. And then you have a kid and like, okay, great. Yay.
Yeah.
And I work a lot with moms, in therapy. And I also have some people that like I follow who are moms and recent moms, and they all talk about their birth trauma and all of these
Yeah.
like very difficult experiences they've had. And these are things that nobody tells you about.
Yeah.
And they're genuinely considerations you should have.
They
Because
are.
you can choose not to have a kid for whatever reason, including you just don't want to be pregnant. I don't think
Yeah.
I'd be a very nice pregnant lady.
That's okay.
That's a big consideration. I'm not even joking. I actually am thinking heavily on the side of just those first couple of, just those first months of just being pregnant, that whole process. Is that worth it, first of all, for me? Can I handle it? Can I be a sane person? I don't think I can.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it. I recently heard about the complications too, and I'm like, why has no one told me about this before?
Yeah,
So,
I know. It's scary though.
mm-hmm.
And it's like I said, I work with a lot of moms, and like there's just such a pressure being a parent of what it means to be a good parent. There's so
Yes.
many opinions. Even after you have a child, the opinions don't stop. The pressures to parent in a certain way, they don't stop. There's always pressures. There's always the next thing.
Mm-hmm. Always.
Always. Which is
It
why I
doesn't
think it's
stop.
so wonderful, like you said, that more and more people now are using their privilege when they can to choose and
Mm-hmm.
figure out what they want.
Yeah. And I feel like more and more people are starting to do self work and trying to figure out what they
Yeah.
really want themselves. And so if it doesn't align with what their parents or in laws expect or society expects, they're comfortable to do what they want in that way, even though there
Mm-hmm.
are unacceptable consequences that come
Yeah.
after. But they choose
Mm.
to be true to what they want and who they are. And I think that's what matters
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Like,
Yeah.
working as a child life specialist and working with pediatric patients and families, like I get asked a lot sometimes, like in my line of work, like, do you have kids? Like, you're so good with them. Like, you know, you have to be a mom. And I'm like, no, I'm not, and then I'll like leave that
Mm.
conversation thinking like, oh, wow, like I just the work that I do can just sometimes be so draining. Just like at this point in my life, I don't know if I can imagine coming home, like working with kids all day and then coming home to my own and being the
Yeah.
true and the most authentic mother that I would like to be if I would be able to do
Right.
that, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So
I
it's
mean, there's no
just, it's
perfection,
heavy.
but
Yeah.
still, having the capacity is a big thing. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know what they say, when you're a parent, you're often working on fumes anyway.
And then the response to that comment that I just made would be, oh, then just quit your job. Or like, just like reduce your
So
hours.
simple. Mm.
And I'm like, it's not that simple, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Mm.
just, why do I have to sacrifice
Yeah.
when it comes to societal expectations and standards?
Yeah. You're allowed to want your career more than you want to have a child. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
why
And
do
it's
we all
not
need to
just,
be the same thing and the same
yeah.
people
And
and want the same things? We
yeah,
don't.
career was definitely a big one that was mentioned in the South Asian articles, but like just looking in general in
Really?
society, of couples choosing not to have kids. It was like other things too, like wanting to travel, not wanting to come home, like have that big responsibility, wanting to focus on each other and focus on that relationship. Or like that comment I mentioned, like not
Mm.
passing down the generational trauma, which
Yeah.
I feel like is a big one.
Yeah.
And we've talked
You
about it in a
know what?
previous podcast.
Yeah. And I love that this is a conversation, though, and that there's an awareness around it, because I absolutely love it when I have clients who are like either thinking about being parents or are parents, and they come because they specifically want to unpack and heal and learn how to
Yes.
not let their intergenerational trauma trickle down into another generation. And I love when that happens. Woo-hoo. It's so warming to
those people.
I know. Yay.
That's amazing.
It's so amazing. And because it's not easy, you know, it does require so much effort and commitment, but it just makes me so happy to see that people have access to this kind of care and are willing and taking the leap of faith to put in the effort to make that happen. So amazing.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing your personal experiences. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Well, you will privately hear the rest of the journey, I'm sure, soon enough in the next 6 months.
And VIP.
VIP access, yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah, this is just one of those topics I feel like that can be so heavy and like charged. So, you know, it's something that definitely requires curiosity, non-judgment, space.
Yeah. I would definitely be interested to hear, like, you know, on the other side, like after becoming a mother, like what pressures or what experiences have you faced? Or what were the reasons, right? Or is that something you wanted or you were pressured into doing? Just something like, you know, we're on the other side right now. So we have that experience. But I would, you know, be definitely interested to hear from mothers and their experiences and their voices.
Yeah. Well, shall we wrap up our podcast today then?
Yes. Do you want to wrap it up for us?
I will. So, a reminder, as always, if our podcast has resonated with you and if you'd like to share your story or just ask any questions or just drop in and also just say hey, feel free to reach out to us at our handle on any of our social media accounts. Our handle is at TalkSouthAsianToMe and our email is talkSouthAsianToMe@gmail.com.
Awesome.
Alrighty. So we'll see everybody or you will hear us at the next podcast, which is what's after
L.
K? L. And
I'm like saying
no
the
spoilers.
alphabet in my
L. Yeah, ABC. If you do that.
L.
All right.
Woo-hoo.
Bye for now.
Bye.